89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan, on a blistery cold night. Are you sure we're actually going out over the air,
We're
Bill?
on air.
Hey, good. Hey,
I
wow.
did get a note from somebody that said they could not hear you last week.
Me,
You.
and I'm usually loud.
You're loud.
Yeah, well, so I don't know what that means. We will figure out. Maybe we'll have to go out and check and see if everybody is actually up at the volume they need to be. We'll find out. That's not good. So tell me, Bill, what's been new? You're working on a story here.
I am working on an article about the Beatles coming to America,
Yeah.
which is February 9th.
February
February 9th. Yeah, it was when they were on the Ed Sullivan Show. And they were on the Ed Sullivan Show 3 times in a very short period of time. And then later in the year came back and did 25, 35 concerts.
Oh, wow. So if anybody has any anecdotes.
Yes, especially that first time coming to America.
Yeah, that was important.
People that saw the Ed Sullivan Show, people that were on stage with him, and that sounds far-fetched, but I've discovered 3 people in the Lansing area that were on stage or backstage with the Beatles.
Wow.
So if anyone's interested and has an
The
anecdote.
year again? 59?
Pardon?
50?
Oh, 64. It's the 50th anniversary.
Oh, 50th. Okay.
50th anniversary. And this weekend I spoke with a speed skater from Essexville, Michigan, my hometown,
Yeah.
who won the gold medal in the 64 Olympics. And Ed Sullivan had him on the show. And you can understand why, because he was a barber.
Oh.
Ed Sullivan was trying to be cute.
Yeah.
So he posed a photograph of him cutting the Beatles' hair. But
they did that kind of corny stuff and still do it today.
Yeah, Ed Sullivan was pretty smart.
Yeah, he was.
He didn't look or act like it, but he was a great promoter.
Yeah.
But if somebody wants to get in touch with me, it's the best way would be to go to mittenlit.com and hit contact info probably.
Yeah, or they can find you on Facebook and
on
message
Facebook,
you there.
Yes, Facebook and
there
message.
There aren't too many Bill Castaneers roaming around. Yeah. Plus, do me a favor and talk a little bit about the story you had last week with Jim Harrison. You've been getting quite a reaction to that.
Yeah, I did. And fortunately, it's all positive, and no one's saying you made a mistake. But last week, I wrote a cover story for Lansing City Pulse on Jim Harrison, who's a Michigan author. He lives now in Mexican border. He lives near, and in Montana. But he used to live in Michigan most of his life until he moved away about 10 years ago.
It's actually Arizona, isn't it?
It is Patagonia, Arizona, which is really close to the border.
Yeah.
I mean, he said he can sit on his front porch when there's no rattlesnakes and watch, and he's very supportive of illegal immigration because he feeds them. But he says they just come running by his house all the time. It's quite interesting. But I talked to about 6 of both his pals and people who have put together a bibliography and a book about his conversations. And as well as I know Jim and have covered him before, I learned a lot of things that I really didn't know before about him. Very interesting.
Exceptional person.
He's extremely, and he's also getting better.
Really?
I mean, his writing, I think, is getting better.
Wow. Isn't that encouraging to think? I mean,
he's 76 years old. He has not led the most, how would you say it politely?
Circumspect?
His lifestyle wasn't, until recently, wasn't the best. And he's writing 2 books a year.
Isn't that amazing?
He's up in his 50, I think close to 50 books now.
Wow, that's just fantastic. And you said that there are so many people out there who really have affection for him.
They do. They love the guy.
Yeah.
And I think it's because he's unassuming.
He is. I mean, as I told you, and I have to get that over to the Grand Valley where I guess they're going to be collecting all of his papers.
They have all his papers over there.
He sent me a letter years ago. I'd sent him a fan letter, sent me a brilliant letter back. I mean, he's just a thoughtful guy, and I really think it's too bad, kind of, that Michigan lost him.
It is,
because this is.
He was a treasure.
He was, yeah.
He doesn't get back much anymore. If he gets back once a year, that's a lot. And speaking of letters, I was talking with the archivist Nancy Richard for Jim Harrison's papers, and I asked her what she likes in them. She says, well, recently what she's found is very interesting is his correspondence with Mario Batali, the cook, the chef, because they're great pals, and they're talking about doing a book, so they're writing back and forth all the time.
Well, didn't he basically bring Batali in here? I mean, isn't that how Batali came to Michigan?
He noticed it through Jim. Yeah. Now Batali's got a place in
TC.
TC. He's got like 5 or 6 restaurants in New York.
Picked up a wife. You're
Yep. Yeah. Right. We're not going to go into that.
Okay, we won't go into that. All right.
Forgot about that.
Big Gossipville, you should.
Yeah, not that.
Not
It's
that.
too close to home, I think, here in Lansing area.
Well, his new book, Brown Dog, is coming out.
Yes, it's a collection of 6 novellas on Brown Dog, a very infamous UP character who's kind of a bad guy, but he has good instincts and he takes care of people, and that's really what matters. But he doesn't kind of clutter his life with anything except drugs. No, not drugs, alcohol, sex, and road trips.
Oh, well, you can get by with that, I guess.
Mhm.
It sounds like sort of Neil Cassidy, right?
A little bit, but he has a conscience.
Ah,
And
good
Brown
difference.
Dog takes care of people that are less
Oh.
fortunate than him, which in the Indian population, which he generally runs in, there are a lot.
Mm.
But yeah, it's fun. It's a little over the top. It's ribald humor.
That's great stuff, though.
It
No,
is.
it's just really wonderful. Well, the only real announcement that I have to make is that now that my final exams are over, and as I'm pondering, thinking that when I return back to MSU, I'm going to have to tell my boss that I actually have this new secret assignment with the CIA. So I won't be, they're going to need somebody to cover my classes, and they're going to have to pick up those expense trips, like that $14,000 round trip ticket to London for me. John C. Beale, have you heard about this gentleman who did this since the year 2000? He was the highest paid executive at the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and told everybody he couldn't be there much because he was actually an undercover person for the CIA. He had no connection to the CIA whatsoever, had never even visited there, and he collected his salary and racked up all these expenses, including that $14,000 ticket to London. And they said about $250,000 worth of travel over the years. Mr. Beale is in a bit of hot water, but I want that job now that it's open.
It's probably illegal to say you're with the CIA, isn't it? I wonder if it
Oh,
is.
that's a good question.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, it's
impersonating.
I'd say it's
illegal.
impersonating.
Yeah, federal officers.
Yeah, it's probably not a good thing to do.
Oh.
Plus, you could probably get yourself killed.
I mean, I think there are a few people at the EPA that would be tempted, let alone at the CIA. I was watching the last episode of the season finale of Homeland last night when Carrie put the star on the wall for Brody. Maybe she should have put a star on the wall for Beale because
Hey,
he's going to.
wait a minute. You can't say that on the air.
It's already over.
I know, but a lot of people haven't watched
They
it.
gotta watch.
I take it. They taped it. Oh my God, I've been
You know,
watching all season.
They don't watch it with any synchronicity.
Well, I mean, it's been all over the press.
Yes, it has.
Yeah,
I
it
love
has.
that show.
Yeah, even this year?
Yes. I do.
We are joined by Therese Dawe, who's. So I thought it was actually went downhill this year.
It was not the pace that I would have liked, in the complexity.
Right.
And the whining little daughter. I just want to put a bullet in her
Everybody
head.
hated Dana.
Oh my
They wanted
God.
Dana out of there. And I
Yeah.
think that's the fine reason that they finally killed off Brody. It's so they can get rid of the
Oh,
daughters.
please.
God.
For the love of God, we've had teenagers. I don't need to see that. It had nothing to do with the plot either. It didn't move the plot anywhere. It was
No.
just sort of this annoying sort of interlude in the show, like, oh, here she is again.
And her dippy boyfriend with the bad
Oh,
hair.
yeah.
Mm.
And the mom with the little face, the sad face all the time.
And the Cypher brother that gets ignored all
Yeah,
the
that
time.
poor kid. He's gonna
Sounds
have
like a
issues.
normal family.
Yeah,
He's
but
gonna
who
have
wants to
issues.
watch a normal family?
Right.
I mean, that's the
That's
real
not
one.
why you watch
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah.
The other problem I thought was that really last night when Carrie and Brody were talking, as he was expressing his doubts over why it is he had just done what he had done and killed somebody for God and country, and realized that he didn't like what he had done and he didn't feel right about it. And Carrie was this sort of patriotic Tea Party true believer there. It was really kind of an interesting byplay. But I think that's what I've missed all this season, is the kind of nuanced discussion of what are we really trying to do with foreign policy that I thought the show was about.
Mhm.
And instead it didn't really seem to hit those marks.
It seemed to change a lot. There's like, here's what we're doing. Oh, here's what we're really doing. Nope. Well, here's what we're really doing behind that. I think that probably goes on a lot.
When we saw the United States, however, decide that they're going to negotiate with Iran, it certainly played into their plot line, didn't it? I mean, it was as if they had predicted it. I thought that was pretty good.
Well, that happens a lot
Yeah,
in
well.
fiction.
And I was interested in the character Juvati because even though I watched him brutally murder his ex-wife or wife,
Oh, that was awful.
I kind of liked him.
You did?
I find him a kind of interesting character. When he was talking with Claire Danes last night and explaining why it is that she should just let this happen, you could see that I thought he had a pretty decent argument to make that this is the only way it could turn out. So,
I found it very unthinkable that they could turn him around and send him back that easily.
well, if we're going to talk plot holes, then I don't think we should even put Homeland on the map.
TV.
Yes.
Yeah, it is
It is
TV, and it's the Sopranos. I think were fairly close. They were plausible. Homeland is definitely fiction, but still enjoyable. But before, I want to sort of switch gears now, and I guess we're talking about a little bit of EPA type, CIA type intrigue and fraud, and that's a good segue into our guest Ray Holman. Ray is with the United Auto Workers, and he's here to talk about a series of protests that are taking place. One was today, one tomorrow, one Wednesday, because the union workers in Michigan are really in a bind right now, trying to figure out what's going to happen with their contract.
Working people are really getting squeezed. And the reason we're protesting right now is Governor Snyder is basically telling us to pay more for less health insurance. And, over the last 10 years, state employees have really made big concessions to help the state balance its books. In the past, the state was running huge deficits. But right now, you're looking at $600 million in the rainy day fund. Some people are saying that could go up to $1 billion by the end of the year. And we've done concessions. And 2 years ago, Governor Snyder said he was going to do some major cutting and some readjustments to our benefits. And he did that. And we worked it out at the bargaining table in 2010. But lo and behold, we come back to this year. And again, they're asking for major concessions when we have a surplus. And so essentially what's going on this week is we're holding a series of protests. We're following Governor Snyder around to his various offices around the state. We were in the Cadillac place today in Detroit, and
did you see him?
He did not come out. Santa Claus was there, but he wasn't there.
Maybe that's how he got in and out.
The Grinch made an appearance. And then tomorrow we'll be at the Romney building, which is his Lansing office. And then finally on Wednesday, December 18th, we're going to go to the civil service hearing. And unfortunately this year, Bonnie, the 17,000 members we represent in all the state departments, and for that matter, all 35,000 unionized state employees are not going to get to vote on a contract because we couldn't come up with an agreement regarding wages and benefits.
You're at an impasse.
We're at an impasse. And the day before Thanksgiving, the impasse panel ruled, and they basically favored Governor Snyder in terms of asking us to pay more for less health insurance. And so on the 18th, the civil service will make a final ruling, and that will be it. And we'll see what our next year's contract looks like.
I think of unions as, I think people need to understand that their function is really to be inequality equalizers. I mean, we're now becoming increasingly aware of the tremendous inequalities in our society, that you're taking almost, in some cases, half of the money, half of the wealth in this country, and taking it off the table and making it untouchable by putting it in the hands of about 400 families nationwide. And I don't know, I mean, you can't take that much wealth out of an economy and have enough left to share, and even enough for people to have the money to buy the things that keeps the economy going. And that's what, your job as in the union is to try to be the equalizing force, that you equalize our power against this rising inequality.
What a union does is it provides working people with a voice and dignity in the workplace. And, it's also about power, and that's why our opponents are spending millions and millions of dollars to defeat us and to weaken us. And you're absolutely right. And, state employees too, we represent the caseworkers that work in the Department of Human Services, and people are really suffering. And, what this governor did when he came into office is he made a huge tax shift. We're taxing private and public pensions. There's a $1.6 billion tax cut for big businesses. And my question for you, Bonnie, is where are all the jobs?
Right.
So, he came in and we were going to have these tax shifts. They weren't tax cuts, they were shifts. So you shifted the tax from big business to working people, and allegedly we're going to have all these jobs. Well, we don't have a lot of jobs.
The ones they're generating are the kind of jobs that people are squealing about because they don't pay enough to be able to support a family.
That's right. And today, Mark Schauer showed up, who's running for governor, and that's one thing he talked about was raising the minimum wage. And that's something the UAW Local 6,000 definitely supports, is we need to raise the minimum wage. There's no doubt about it.
Isn't it sad? I mean, we have to go state by state now, I guess, to do that because we're not really going to see it quickly or easily a rise in the federal minimum wage. It appears that Obama may use it as a sort of rallying cry, but when you look at the House of Representatives, there's no way that realistically there's going to be any vote to improve the federal minimum wage.
So that's gonna mean, if state employees pay more for their health care, that means retirees will too.
We
Oh,
do
Typically,
no.
typically, you're correct. We do not bargain for the retirees, but history would suggest that you can look forward to basically a reduction in coverage.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Is that right? So
Oh,
that,
absolutely,
yeah.
yeah. And that's the way bargaining usually works, plus and minus.
Well, I just see this weakening, this attempt to sort of weaken the democratic system, really, is what we're talking about. There's now apparently going to be a right-wing funded attempt to put change to the Michigan legislature becoming part-time, put it on the ballot. It's the kind of thing that people love to vote for. Oh, yeah, we don't need a full-time legislature. We can do it a part-time legislature. We'll pay everybody 37 grand a year. That'll be great. First of all, then you really are going to talk about the staff and the lobbyists controlling everything. The corporate takeover will be complete, and we will see the privatization of everything and everything going into privatized hands. You were talking about at the same time that your contract is coming up, things for the prison food workers are coming up as well.
Well, they privatize prison food service, and the UAW Local 6000 actually does not represent those employees. We represent nurses and psychologists and doctors and a whole host of different people that work for the Department of Corrections. We don't represent them, but we were dead set opposed to it because we know that outsourcing important jobs like that is not a good idea. And when you're talking about prison food service, the number one goal when you work inside a facility is security and safety. And a lot of those people were trained and they could act as officers while doing their same job. And so if you're going to be putting people in a dangerous situation without appropriate training, paying them wages that, don't attract qualified people, it's not a good idea. And that's another reason, Bonnie and Bill, that I believe the unions are under attack here in Michigan is because of outsourcing. And last year, and I was on the program we talked about, they did try to privatize our mental health and physical health professionals in the Department of Corrections. We have 32 facilities. They were not able to do it, but they did unfortunately privatize the food workers. And part of the reason that we were able to prevent the outsourcing those positions is through our union. We had an attorney, we had an economist. We were able to get our psychologists, our nurses together after hours and run our own numbers and present information to the legislature showing how we were actually a better deal.
Yeah.
And we won. But you know what? If we didn't have a union, we didn't have that ability, those jobs would have been outsourced. And the other thing I'm really advocating is using that word outsourcing. Sometimes when you say the word privatization, people think it's a good thing, like you're creating jobs.
Right.
But really what you're talking about is outsourcing jobs that should be handled by government, like child protection. In Kent County, they privatize all foster care and adoption and those type of things. And so that's another big thing that unions do is try to be a voice for reason. There's a lot of people that make money off state government, and there's powerful interest groups that want to sell off state government. And so that's another big thing that we're doing at UAW Local 6000 is talking about outsourcing and trying to prevent it.
What it really is that the contracts will probably still be for the same amount of money, but now you will have to pull profits out of them for the people in the upper elites to be able to take their share as corporate profits, and meanwhile turn good jobs into bad jobs.
Yeah,
For
that's
people who work and
yeah,
do the same work.
it's true. I mean, so what they cut wages, cut benefits, and and also the
And
state
training
and safety. And one of the things that we looked at when they were privatizing the healthcare or wanted to privatize, I should again outsource healthcare is they were going to reduce services to the prisoners, provide less healthcare towards them. So you're going to be releasing sick people. You're going to incur lawsuits because people are not going to be given adequate medical care in the facilities, and that's how they were saving money. And we were able to show the powers that be that was a problem. But no, you're absolutely right.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ, here in Lansing, Michigan. And Therese, you were telling us that you had run into somebody who is on the way into one of those jobs in the food service in the prisons.
Well, I know someone who just got laid off. She'd been working there for years, was very seasoned, certified food service person. They were all laid off recently. It's prison up north, and they're bringing in kids basically that have worked at Arby's or McDonald's, who do not have the history of knowing the culture in prison.
Which is,
And that's that's a really serious thing to know. It isn't just about the food. It's about, really knowing, what's going on around you and not underestimating why these people are behind bars.
What you can't have, as you were talking about, teenage girls come in dressed the way that they might.
Yes.
It's going to be perceived as provocative on the part of the prisoners. They will not be trained to have the sort of street smarts necessary.
No.
We have routinely used prisons as rural hiring job programs. We put them in rural areas, which makes it profoundly difficult for people to visit their families because many of the people in prison come from urban areas. But we put these out in these rural areas where naive teenagers and young adults now are going to be in those now cheapened jobs that don't pay as well, and they're going to be put at risk.
Yeah, put at risk. This woman said she's middle-aged. She said she dresses down. She always wears an apron. She wears loose, baggy pants, because she's been trained. Like, you do not want to be a target. You don't want to draw attention to any part of your body. Just, it's common sense, but it's also training about the culture of prison that these kids are not getting. They got like a week of training about the food.
They might want to have some of those legislators watch an episode or two of Oz before they think about sending a bunch of rural teenagers in to do the job that seasoned professionals once handled. But those are the kinds of shifts we're seeing, and I don't understand why we want to take the few good jobs we have and make them worse jobs. That doesn't make sense to me.
It's a tricky business, and you're absolutely right, though. I mean, you don't want to have prisons, to create jobs. You want to do it the right way, and that's why it's important probably for government to handle the responsibilities. And, the UAW Local 6000, we represent a lot of people that work in our 32 facilities, but, we want to do things the right way. We don't want to have prisons, to warehouse people and to make money off incarceration. We want to have prisons, for the right reasons. And, across the country, too, we're relying on solitary confinement way too much. And that's something, we really need to look at. And
it's torture, by the way.
Yes, that's
the
right.
The Geneva Convention considers solitary confinement torture, and Amnesty International has really been all over us for this. We not only use it, we use it in ways that are absolutely shockingly brutal. People that are kept in isolation for years. Now, we're not just talking about a day or two as some sort of punishment, but years. And what we have then are people breaking down, becoming severely mentally ill, self-mutilating, causing all sorts of problems for the staff. The staff then becomes more and more harsh and brutal in its responses. It's a downward escalation that we're seeing, and we have more people incarcerated than any other nation on earth, and we're busy doing this at high cost. I mean, it's so much more expensive to keep somebody behind bars than to educate them. I mean, I don't know why we're on this trajectory, and it doesn't seem to be getting that much better.
Well, unfortunately, too, we've closed so many mental health facilities, and, really, that was part of the problem. And unfortunately, the place of last resort is the prisons. And so we have a lot of mentally ill people, unfortunately, in the prisons. And, but, it's the whole big picture about investing in public service and what happens when you try to outsource and try to do things for the wrong reasons. And so what we want to do is, advocate for doing things, again, for the right reasons. And again, it's why when you look at things like child protection, you want to privatize child protection. That's something else that could be very dangerous to do. And a lot of the jobs that state employees do. And again, ultimately, the state's still responsible. So when you have these horrible situations and these costly lawsuits, the state's still ending up paying. And you're also creating additional levels of bureaucracy. My political opponents quite often talk about efficiencies. Well, you outsource stuff, you're creating more and more layers of bureaucracy too. That's another, problem.
Have you ever seen a credible research document that shows that outsourcing prisons works? I can't recall.
Oh, no, that's not why it's done.
Oh, I know it. yeah.
You can't do those studies when you can't prove, because that's not why it's being done anyhow. Yeah, you don't want to take a look because you'd find out it doesn't.
It doesn't work.
Now, I think Brushy Mountain State Prison was the first to go completely private, and the Corrections Corporation of America has made a fortune ever since then. I was working in community policing at the time that change took place, and we were starting to think about extending that policing reform into correctional officer reform and doing community corrections, trying to figure out ways to use non-arrest strategies in the community, solve problems without putting people into the criminal justice system, use more informal social control. I mean, you'd be surprised how much people will respond to social pressures in the community. You don't necessarily have to throw them into prison in order to teach them a lesson. In fact, the real lesson is to teach them how to live in the community. And so we were working on all of this when all of a sudden it went completely the other way. I mean, we saw things like the 9/11, I think, just undid so much of the progress that we had made. We saw the drug warriors really not want to give up their battle, and that's the reason that our prisons have escalated to the point that they have. And they were on a rampage. They found themselves able to be self-funding through their own forfeiture laws. So the DEA is a self-funding agency that shares its largesse with local law enforcement, and they've become addicted to those budgets. It's going to be a tough system to turn around. I mean, you're losing power. You've got to get that power back. What's going to happen on right to work?
Well, right to work, we became the 24th right to work state last December. I was there at 3 in the morning, and then we had a giant protest. And I mentioned Mark Schauer earlier today. He was at a protest in Detroit. He got pepper sprayed, if you remember, at the Capitol. And our contract expires December 31st. So January 1st, 17,000 members in our union will be right to work. They'll have to make a decision whether they want to join our union or not. And it's been interesting seeing what's happened to the teachers as their contract in various school districts around the state have come up since March. And the vast majority, 99% of them, have been signing right back up for the union. So we're gearing up to see what happens. I've been doing a lot of traveling, educating our members about what right to work is, or right to work for less actually means. But I should say really the Coalition of State Employees has a lawsuit right now, because in Michigan, come under the sole authority of the Civil Service Commission. So there's still an open question whether the law applies to us still.
Yeah.
But we're assuming we're going to be right to work on January 1st.
I was reading a column by Tim Skubik the other day on M Live, where he's hastening back to the major protest at the Capitol last year. And I guess I was surprised to hear him say, and I heard so many people say that, how worried they were for their safety. The irony was, this is a canard that I think has really shown me some of the change in attitude toward union workers. I felt completely safe there. I got a little nervous at the Tea Party rallies.
Oh, absolutely.
They made me uncomfortable. The gun rallies, talking to mom and pop with the AK-47 slung over their shoulder, that made me nervous, especially since I was asking them some tough questions. But at the union rally, what is this paranoia?
And the thing that's funny about that, we're actually the union, we're pretty orderly when we do things. We do the Pledge of Allegiance every meeting, and we all sort of wait our turn, and we're conditioned really to sort of be orderly. We stay in line. No, really, we're like probably the nicest protesters you ever want to meet. We wear our little uniforms, and yeah, exactly. And it's funny too, that particular few days, if you remember, the police cars lined up behind the Capitol looked like the Roman Empire. I was like, whoa.
It did.
Yeah.
It was scary.
No,
yeah.
But it wasn't the crowd that made me scared.
Well, and I don't. Yeah, Skubik wasn't talking about the police presence as making him frightened, but that's what frightened
And
me.
I'm not afraid of police officers, but when you see that many in one place and snipers on the top of buildings, it's like, this is what's going on.
Anytime the guys in the ninja suits show up, I'm not a
Right.
happy person.
Right.
I mean, we have allowed the full-on militarization of the police.
Well,
that scares me.
those particular days, they're actually you said ninja, SWAT, I'm not sure what they are, but the guys dressed up in the pads and look like automatic weapons. There was a contingent of them in the basement, ready to do whatever they need. Of course, they never came out, thank goodness, but they were there, so they were ready. And I think you remember that was in Wisconsin too, and where they had taken over the Capitol for weeks and weeks and days. That it was pretty tame there too. I mean,
it's a lot of drumming. If
Yeah.
Really, drumming bothers you. That might be the only
Right.
thing that was really going to rattle you. But I was really sort of insulted by that. I just thought that was an insult to the unions. This idea that we all have to be paranoid that
They're a bunch of thugs.
Yes.
Well, and what happened that during that time period is Governor Snyder had sent an email out on the state email system saying, hey, take a buddy, go to your car. There could be union people lurking
You're
around.
gonna have like a 2x4.
Like
ready
be
to whack
careful, report
somebody.
anything suspicious. And we're like, really? Are you really doing that, Governor
That
Snyder?
was disgusting.
Yeah.
We're disgusting. Yeah. This is.
And I'd like to know who dreamt it up originally, that this could be a violent demonstration.
I heard it everywhere,
Yeah.
including just sort of passed on as gospel in the mainstream media, which I thought was really surprising to me, because we are in a union state. You would think that the media would be more understanding of the union.
And the history of violence in unions goes the other way.
The death count is certainly one way, isn't it? This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Ray Holman of the UAW. And I want to remind Ray, before I know he has to leave because he's got to get ready for tomorrow and Wednesday, but I want you to go again and tell me the times and places on those two protests, tomorrow and Wednesday.
Yeah, correct. So tomorrow, December 17th, we're going to be meeting from the Romney building, which is directly across the street from the Capitol, and that's Governor Snyder's
The old
Lansing
Jack
office.
Tar Hotel. I was, yeah, that's I'm sure how long I've been around town. That's the way I remember it.
Exactly. We're going to be at that building. And I should also say, it's not just the UAW Local 6000, it's really the Coalition of State Employee Unions, so SEIU and AFSCME and MCO. And so all of us, we're going to be, and you know what, we're inviting all our friends, progressive friends, supportive friends, working people. We had a lot of working people that weren't even state employees at our rally today. But so that's tomorrow at noon for about an hour. We should have some speakers. Hopefully Santa will appear again. And then on Wednesday,
Is he black?
Santa.
Silly. Don't you
Or
watch
is he
the
a fox?
news?
Let me. I can tell you this: Santa's actually not even a male.
Oh my God! Oh my! Megan Kelly will never show.
Yeah, Santa's name is Rachel, but
Sweet.
Now that's better than anything I've heard in a long time.
Yeah.
Right? I've always thought
See
that
what the
folks
state
were
employees
like,
pull off?
It is
That's why
right.
You gotta watch them.
yeah, if you go on my Facebook, you can see
Oh,
pictures.
that's
But
weird.
so yeah, so tomorrow that at the Romney building, and then Wednesday's the big day of the civil service hearing. And so we're asking our members to come 9 or 9:30. The actual hearing starts at 10. It could go a few hours, and that's 400 South Pine Street, Capitol Pine Street, and that's where the civil service hearing. And so we're going to be outside demonstrating, and then also we're going to have a member. Is it open for the public? And so hopefully we're going to have a lot of state employees.
And our listeners probably don't know it's going up to 60 now, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. In my dreams, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to keep breathing on the lens
Yeah.
of my video
Yeah.
camera to keep it from
Yeah.
fogging over. But noon tomorrow and 9:30 on Wednesday. And
Correct.
thank you very much.
Thank
Right,
you.
Thank you for the update, and I hope you come back and let us know what happens.
Anytime. It was awesome being here.
We
It's good seeing you
Good
guys.
to
Thank
see
you. Thanks for telling us about Santa.
Yeah.
Well, now we have to find out, or one of the changing gears here, we're going to talk a little bit. See, one of the problems with, we do a live webcast at the same time, right? So I have to keep shifting the camera, and I keep forgetting that with my new computer, my little mouse doesn't work, so I have a separate mouse, one of those. It's always a tech thing here. Well, we need to talk with Therese, and Therese Dawe has been a frequent contributor to Lansing Online News, and she's really talked a lot in the area of death and dying and dealing with people who have health issues and problems. Now, we invited her here tonight to talk about two things, and the first thing is really last week we had talked about dealing at the holidays with people who are on the autism spectrum and how that can pose a challenge for families. And we thought, the other thing that families are facing nowadays is so many family members with Alzheimer's. And you've seen cases of this and worked with families who have challenges like this. What are the particular stresses at the holidays? What should people know if there's a family member who is beginning to experience problems with dementia or Alzheimer's? How can we integrate them into the family experience without anybody getting too stressed?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that people are very easily overstimulated. And at holidays, everybody's running in and kissing grandma and hugging grandma, and, lots of noise and music. All of that is very stressful to people with memory deficits. Even if someone's living in a facility, everybody always thinks, oh, let's get them out. Let's bring them home. That's very upsetting. Taking them out of their element. It's much nicer to go to them. Because even though it's not home, it's their home. And so all the steps up into the house, a different bathroom, the lights, the sounds, the kids running around, it's just so hard for them to process. So I always say bring Christmas to them.
Oh, that's a good idea. Oh, yeah.
Another tip is that a lot of times people with memory issues don't remember that you came to visit. And I always suggest that you keep a journal in the room so that even if they don't remember, someone else can say, oh, Mom, look, remember? Judy did come to visit, and look, she wrote you a little note.
Yeah.
They might not really remember that, but they can look at that and see that handwriting and say, okay, it just helps to sort of bring them back.
I visited my grandmother. I happened to be in business in Cleveland at the time after my grandmother had fractured her hip, and that was, as is often the case in that era. And she was on her way out, unfortunately, because she then contracted pneumonia and died. But that gave me an opportunity to visit her, which I might not have otherwise had the opportunity to do. And I spent about an hour with her. Then I was leaving, and she said, "Oh, it was so good to see you, Laverne." And
So
I thought
next
to
time I'll bring
myself,
Shirley.
Laverne is going to get credit for this visit. She's going to die thinking. So I thought, yes, I should have left a little note. No, it was Bonnie. It was really.
Yeah.
That's really important. I think I know Therese and I know you, Bonnie, know that my spouse they're working through a younger brother, two of her sisters and herself. They stay 24 hours a day with him, taking turns, and he has Alzheimer's. And all those situations you explain are exactly. I mean, they learn you learn very quickly too.
Yes.
There are some great training programs out there though that I would recommend everyone try to get in touch with is it the Alzheimer's Association,
Yes.
find out where they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have support groups that are really good too.
Right. A lot of things are just totally counterintuitive.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Well, like you think they'd love to go home for the
Right,
holiday.
right. Yeah.
Mm.
No.
No.
In fact, it would be unsettling.
You know, little things like turning the television set on during news gets them really riled.
Ah.
Yeah.
Loud noises, right?
Yes. Loud noises, different lighting, just the pattern in your carpeting. You know, people with Alzheimer's are shuffling and they're looking down, and if there's lots of pattern in the flooring, it really messes up their brain.
Wow.
Yeah, if you go into really good dementia homes, facilities, there's usually very plain carpeting because of that.
Interesting. So they want a sort of bland, controlled environment. That's the best.
Low stimuli.
And when you're thinking about something like Christmas, you've got the flashing lights. You've got. I mean, everything. It couldn't be a worse idea, could it?
Right.
I mean, that really. So you have to sort of think about paring it down for them, or keeping them in a one location. You know, if there's no other solution than to have them at your place, try to find a safe place for them.
Yes.
One of the other things I know that my husband was dealing with that within his family, with more than one person in his family. And the thing that he learned by looking at some of the information online was that so many people want to sort of try to argue with the person that didn't you just tell me that, as if somehow it's going to have an impact on them. And that's our first impulse. We want to be helpful, but it's not a helpful impulse.
You have to meet them where they're at. You know, if they're back 20 years ago, you just meet them there. You just listen.
Mm-hmm.
You don't argue and say, no, we're right here.
Right.
Meet them where they're at, and they'll be much happier.
And so will you.
And so will you.
Yes.
Yeah.
My spouse says that Alzheimer's has its own language. And I mean, they know what that means when you deal with a person with Alzheimer's. You very quickly learn it's not like anything else you've ever done in life.
It's very complex. I'll never forget one of the first times as a nurse I went into someone's room that had Alzheimer's, and she was not in the first stages, not in the last. She was losing it, and she knew it, but I learned never to ask open-ended questions. There was a picture of her 3 daughters on the bedside, and I was just making conversation. I said, "Who's that?" And she looked at it, and she burst into tears. She said, "I don't know. I think they're my daughters, and I can't remember their names." Well, that was a lesson for me.
Yeah.
You know, don't ask open-ended questions.
You know,
How do you make conversation then? What should you alternately have said?
I think I would ask more, I would comment more like, "Those are lovely girls," and just leave it at that. So I'm not putting her on the spot by trying to identify them and remember. Putting them on the spot, asking them open-ended things where they have to calculate through or remember, it just causes so much stress.
One of the things that I've seen that has been interesting, and it might differ for every Alzheimer's patient is different too. There's no across-the-board stuff, but I know my brother-in-law, who's probably in the last third, you know, if you had to guess, he's got an incredible sense of humor still.
Yes.
I'm wondering how, that's a different part of the brain.
I know.
But I mean, he gets humor.
Yes.
How does that happen? To me, that I would have thought that's one of the more sophisticated things we have. You'd lose that first.
Yes.
In his case, he can still keep right up with you in a way of. Is that typical?
Yes.
Why?
I mean,
I want to know why.
You know, I worked for 5 years in a dementia unit, and I loved it. And the staff, when you work with them, it's not a sad place. Everyone thinks it's very sad. It's not. I remember this little guy hunched over in his wheelchair, and I was trying to determine, where he was at that day cognitively. And I said, so Al, remind me, what did you do before you retired? And he went, as little as possible.
How does that
I
happen?
know, it
I
cracked
don't
me
get it.
up. It cracked me up. He couldn't have told you his middle name
Right,
or what he had for
Right,
breakfast.
or who's asking him
But
the
a
question?
snappy comeback?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
they're great.
Yes.
How can that be?
I don't get it. I want to know. That is
Yes.
the one thing I
It is
want to know.
fascinating. I'd like
We
to
think
see
of
I
that
can
as
ex-
higher brain function, and
It is
apparently
not.
it's in a separate place
It's
in the
someplace
brain.
that's still working.
Yeah.
It still works.
And
That's
sometimes
cool.
people who are very difficult their whole lives become charming.
Ah.
They create their own realities sometimes.
We were talking, my husband and I were talking today about how, for a lot of people, aging does soften you, makes you more compassionate, makes you more aware. I look at George H.W. Bush, right? I mean, he was the head of the CIA. I don't think that is the kind of job that typically attracts kind people, necessarily. But he's a softie now. He cries at things, and he's very emotional. And it's one of the more charming aspects of aging, really. No wonder certain cultures like the Japanese revere the wisdom of the elderly people in their society, because I think they're generally more compassionate. Although part of the problem with Alzheimer is occasional explosive
There can
eruptions.
be. There can be. Yeah.
Is there anything you can do to avoid triggering those, or do you learn what signs will trigger them?
I think sometimes you can't read the signs. The best thing to do is not react. It's just to redirect.
Okay.
Someone says something inappropriate, or they come in and they take all their clothes off. You don't make a scene about it. You just go, hey, why don't we go over here and do this? Come with me. Prodding, sometimes people don't want to go use the bathroom. You don't give them 100 choices or try to, you just say, would you like to take my arm as I take you? And we'll go down the hall here. It's finesse. It's always finessing them, because they're almost like children sometimes. They don't, they're gonna plant their feet, but if you can finesse them and you can be polite to them and kind,
And redirect.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I've learned is you redirect their attention to something else totally.
Yeah.
One story that absolutely enchanted me was the Sandra Day O'Connor story about her husband, who was in a facility. He's dealing with Alzheimer's, and that's one of the reasons she stepped down from the court, was because it was very time consuming, and she really wanted to be able to spend more time and deal with this. He, though, changed personality and fell in love with another patient and no longer loved her, and said very clearly, I now love this new person.
Yes.
And that had to be just excruciatingly painful for her. But at the same time, she understood that that was not something to be judgmental about, and that was good for him. And since she loved him, that was the way to proceed. I mean, it's hard to find anything more selfless than that.
It's a very slow goodbye.
Oh.
Alzheimer's and dementia is. It's a very slow, there's always a time, there's always a moment when someone from the family is no longer recognized. And that is almost like a death.
Yeah.
Grandpa doesn't remember who I am.
You're erased. Yeah. Oh, that's painful.
How can that be? He's right there, and we did all these great things together. It's a very slow, agonizing goodbye.
Even if you're one of the full-time caretakers.
Well, that I think is one of the, they are the unsung heroes in the society, because care is extraordinarily expensive. I see more and more of these memory care facilities popping up around the community, but it's very hard to afford that level of care. I mean, your wife is doing a yeoman's job of taking care of the family.
Yeah, the three of them are. Yeah,
That's
I'm amazed. But they also have a big family. Not everybody has that choice.
Oh, yeah.
You do need
but
a
even
lot
when
of
you
people.
do, not many people would commit themselves to that. That's a wonderful thing if you can do it, but it's a huge drain, even when you have a lot of family members to take.
Oh, I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. My mother, when she was dying, she did not have Alzheimer's, but it was the only private room. And since my mother would never tolerate another person near her, she would probably throw them out. She was in an Alzheimer's unit, so I saw 3 months of the memory care style, and it's interesting.
In what way?
It's interesting. I think they do drug people. I mean, more than they probably should.
That's too bad.
I think the people definitely need more training.
Oh.
And the turnover is pretty.
Nobody wants to pay those people.
Nobody wants to pay it.
They
they're
want
probably
they want
paying
to entrust your family members,
10,
but don't
50
pay
an hour,
them.
I would bet, something like that. But the cost is high, and somebody's making some serious money out of state. Typically, these work.
This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Therese Dawe about the challenges, particularly at the holidays, but certainly year-round as well, in being caregivers for people who have memory issues. and it's more than Alzheimer's. I guess what really worries me is the tremendous explosion we've seen in the numbers. And it can't all be explained away by the extended longevity. And there's something going on, and we're seeing this explosion in numbers in autism and the explosion in numbers in Alzheimer's. Clearly, there's something going on, whether it's background radiation, whether it's background chemicals, or something going on in the environment that's putting people at risk. And Therese hit a nerve with an article she wrote for Lansing Online News recently, and it's sort of a two-edged sword. And Therese is as a self-professed germaphobe, she wants to dip me in antiseptic soap before she touches me. And I'm I just simply merely justify my own slobbishness by saying that I'm building my immune system. I'm challenging my immune system.
Just so people understand, Bonnie raises worms in her living room.
Yes, I do. Vermiculture. That's a nice word for it.
It's worms.
Well,
They're worms.
They're little red wigglers. They're cute. They're in their own little box with their top on them. But that's where my little compost...
You're the only person in the whole world I know that does that. Who else?
Doesn't everybody?
In the living room? No.
Yeah.
No.
It's impressive at parties though when I pull the top off.
Yeah, but right.
Hors d'oeuvres.
Hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah. Oh God. Well, but they're actually quite clean. In fact, we found out that they're using those wigglers in Vietnam to deal with animal waste in ways we'd be smart to. But tell us a little bit about the article that you wrote and why it is that you say that we need to be more concerned. We are seeing a rise in these antibiotic-resistant infections.
We are. And I do think that some of what you were talking about, like the overuse of hand sanitizer, the overuse of antibiotics in general, is reducing, resistance.
Yeah.
But being a germaphobe and having taken microbiology classes, I just think what we can do to keep ourselves more healthy is just to maintain our own cleanliness, which, the environment is just filthy a lot and it doesn't show up.
That's a word I told my husband he's not allowed to use anymore.
Filthy? Yeah, filthy animal.
Yeah.
So things like elevator buttons and snack machine buttons, and I was reading an article today about just how disgustingly gross the handle on the gas when you're putting gas in your car. Think of how many thousands of people are coughing or sneezing into their hand, and then they grab that thing, and then you put gas in your car, and then you're eating something in the car, right? It's just disgusting. There's just hundreds of thousands of microbes.
Really an upbeat conversation
Expanding
for
the
Christmas.
flora and fauna that your body is going to learn to adjust to so that you don't get allergies and other kinds of negative reactions, and so that your immune system gets used to them. We've become so cleanliness oriented that we're busy poisoning the streams. We now discover the Great Lakes are filled with these little beads, and the companies want 2 years before they decide to remove them, right? Well, they could shut off that line tomorrow as far as I'm concerned. They got those little plastic ribbons they put in there and say they're going to exfoliate. Well, they're busy exfoliating the guts of fish, I think that we've gone germaphobe crazy myself. That's my...
A little bit, although I brought an article tonight that I was looking at that says 1 in 20 inpatients has an infection related to being in the hospital. 1 in 20.
Well, the problem is the hospital.
That's correct. The problem is the people that are going from room to room and not washing their hands or washing them properly.
When they open up my body, I do want them to be clean. That is the one time I want them using that antibacterial soap. I mean, that seems to me a really good idea.
I think the OR is probably the cleanest place. Everything is packaged up and autoclaved and
Everything
brand new.
around it isn't.
What they've also discovered is that people get sloppy. And one of the biggest differences, the original estimate was about 110,000 deaths a year caused by what are called idiopathic illnesses. In other words, the illness that you contract in the hospital, either because you get an infection or they give you the wrong pill or the wrong combination of pills.
Or nosocomial infection, hospital related, yes.
And the problem is it's the nasty ones that live there. It's the staph infections and the MRSAs and the rest of them for which our arsenal of antibiotics is not working. So we're reaching a point where I was reading a frightening article not long ago that was talking about if we go back to the days of what it was like in the 1850s before the first round of antibiotics were created, you could literally scratch your hand on a thorn and die as a result because some infection would find its way in and there was nothing you could do about it. That's a concern. I mean, we really do have to be careful about this.
And part of what I wrote in my article was these signs that we see up in the hospital, like, you can ask us to wash our hands. Why should we have to ask you?
Because
Just
they'll forget,
do it.
because they're human.
They are human, but I just think it's a matter of training, and maybe there has to be some penalization. Like, that's just a basic thing that you should be washing your hands when you enter every patient's room. It takes more time. Oh well.
What they found out, Dr. Atwell Gawande, who writes for the New Yorker, he's probably one of the best pro stylists I've ever read. He invented, along with his team, this idea of using checklists. And he said it sounds really stupid, and doctors and hospitals resist them because it says when you enter the room, you have your little checklist with you. Did you wash your hands? And that's because they forget, or they think they just are, I'm in a rush. I'm going to get this done. And because it's on the checklist, it's done. And hospitals that do the checklist will see their mortality rates go down dramatically.
They're implementing that in some Lansing hospitals, as a matter of fact, that show I'm not sure exactly how you describe them, but high infections.
Yeah, they've
high
got
reintroduction to the hospital.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a
I
simple
think you can
thing.
ask to see those statistics now, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
They should be available.
Yeah.
I can tell you that I had a child in the hospital a couple of years ago. She was an adult, and she was going to have this procedure done where they were going to scope down her nose into her esophagus, look around. And it was going to be done at the bedside. Well, the doctor came in. He didn't have a lab coat on. He had his shirt and tie on. He shook my hand.
Yeah.
He shook her hand. He wrote on his clipboard, and then he opened his instrument thing and was about to touch it.
Yeah.
And I stopped him. I said, "Excuse me."
Yeah.
And he turned around and he said, "What's the problem?" I said, "Could you please wash your hands?" He got really crappy with me.
Did he really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very arrogant. Oh,
Yeah.
I can assure you there's more germs down her nose than there are on my hands. And I said, "Well, you can just humor me and go over to the sink and wash your
Different
hands."
germs, though. Those won't kill her.
I just thought, I don't know who you think you're kidding, but that's not protocol. That's not the hospital protocol. The minute he shook my hand, that was whatever he had. I don't care if he was sterile. That my hands might have germs. You don't.
Right.
Yeah. So he was not nice about it, and we have to be prepared to fight for our own health care. And part of that is not getting whatever it was he brought in from another patient.
One of the episodes of The Sopranos that hit home for me was my parents were always timid about talking to their doctors in any kind of way that was perceived as challenging. They were brought up as the generation that, the doctors were God. I was brought up, I think I'm old enough that I remember they didn't put the names of the drugs on your prescription bottles because you weren't supposed to know.
Oh, Lordy.
Yeah. I mean, the blue bottle, just take the blue bottle.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it was like. And they were the gods and you were the acolytes.
Yeah.
Well, they had Uncle Junior in The Sopranos, right, who gave his doctor a hard time and said, "I want a second opinion." And the doctor really messed him over and he almost died just out of spite and bile. And the truth is, some doctors are that arrogant. We do have to do a better job of training physicians in a better sort of approach toward how they treat their patients.
There's also, when I was admitted to a hospital, it's been 20 years ago, and it was pretty serious what I was in there for. They ask you what kind of outcome you want. And I wrote on the form to get out of here alive. It was like they didn't think that was funny. Well, that's what my outcome was. I want to walk out of here alive.
Right.
It was like, but they're strange places. And when my mom was in the hospital, I think not everyone has this ability to do this, but you almost need an advocate for every patient, and that's typically a family member. But you've got to watch things, and you've got to talk to people who come in about things.
You need, especially if you're in a two-person room, one of you better be in pretty good shape so you can help take care of the
Well,
other.
there's things you can do too. Like I would put a sign over the bed saying, "This is the name, and she's allergic to this, and please be aware of this." That really does help.
My first husband died of melanoma. He contracted it when we got married when I was 18 and he was 23. He contracted it in the first year we were married. And he was, quote unquote, one of the lucky cases that lived more than 5 years. He lived 6.5. He was not so lucky at the end. And I saw so many medical mistakes being made. I walked into his room one night and they had decided to group him. He had a large blood clot and was getting blood thinners with a person who was being given blood thinners because who was being given vitamin K, and they had switched the bottles. And so I walked in and I found both IVs, and I found the vitamin K on my husband's, and I found the blood thinner on his. And I grabbed both of them and was holding them, right, and screaming for those were the kinds of, the logic behind taking people with opposite problems and putting them in the same room, somebody had not really thought through that would be more dangerous than having them in separate rooms. Put them in there, somebody with a motorcycle injury.
Same thing with the same name. Two Marys, not a good idea, that kind of thing. I do think most hospital staff really are trying to do a good job, but no one goes for anything minor anymore. Everyone in the hospital is pretty sick.
And they're really out fast. He would spend a month or two a year in the hospital. This wasn't unusual. He would have serious consequences because of the surgeries and the problems that he had. And they would keep him there till he got better. That was the attitude in those days. And he would be in a 30-bed ward. Well, one of the sadder things that happened, and the reason that I think he suffered such a precipitous decline at the end, was that he had been grouped with a young man who had had a heart infection, and they felt they had had it under control. And the kid was only about 18 or 19 years old, and he was in the next bed. And unfortunately, the young man ran into trouble. Ron was unable. He kept hitting the button, but it took a half hour for anybody to come in the room. The young boy died. And he was physically incapable of getting up. He could no longer walk. And he could not get out to the hallway to get a nurse. And those are the kinds of tragedies that just were, I think they were all too common. I don't know that you would ever see anything like that happening today.
I don't think so.
I don't see it. We were impressed by it wasn't in this city, it was in another city, by the level of care.
Oh, that's
But
good.
I think one of the things I noticed, unfortunately it's another city, so I can talk about it, small cities have trouble doing high-end healthcare.
Oh, that's a problem.
Something that you could get done in a big city on a weekend, you have to wait until Monday because they don't have the person that does it.
Yeah.
I went, what?
That's pretty common.
Yeah.
Pretty common in general. Everything just kind of closes down, and
But
you
you
have
go to a
wait.
big hospital complex, so they've got people there all the time.
I'm not sure I'd want that surgery on Friday before the long Christmas. You might want to peg that for, I guess if all possible, I'll wait until after the first of the year.
But you learn a lot when someone or yourself's in a hospital.
I do think, like what you said, having an advocate. If someone in our family goes to the hospital, we've just parked somebody there, just to be a note taker, to keep track of what's being done and to offer some history. Often the person in the bed isn't a good historian about what the symptoms were and what's going on. You need someone there and to monitor. There's a different shift of somebody. You've got to start your story all over again. But you have to be there as the historian.
And you know the patient better than they do. I was over there at U of M with my late husband at the time, and two nurses came in and said, "We have orders to walk you." And Ron said, "Oh, no, you don't understand. I'm having horrible pains in my hips. You can't walk." They said, "Oh, well, that's because you've been on too much bed rest. We have to walk you." And I said, "No, trust me, you don't, this is not a good." I literally had to grab one of the nurses and back her up against a wall. They found out later both of his hips had shattered, and they were about to walk him on two broken hips. But it's the case where, you have to listen to the patient a little bit. They usually know you need an advocate in the room in those situations.
And I think maybe this isn't true everywhere, but there is some understaffing going on and long hours.
Oh, yes.
You could see someone after working 12 hours, the 11th hour.
Yes.
Whoa, that was starting to get pretty scary.
Yeah.
That's a long time to work a person, especially a nurse. That's big time stress
It's
on
why
your
we
feet.
see lab errors too, and those kinds of errors. It's not always just the direct patient care, but the lab errors. Ron had his first melanoma surgery, and he had a small blue dot appear in the same surgical site about a year later. And they took him into Foot Hospital and removed it, and they lost the paraffin block with the sample in it. And they came up the next day and said, "We don't know what to do. We've lost the sample. Would you like us to take your leg off? Because that might be what we'd have to do to save you if it was cancer. If it wasn't cancer, we could leave it on." I don't think you really do that to a patient a day after surgery.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, he took sort of a downhill turn after that, so they put him in an ambulance and sent him to Ann Arbor.
I think always asking questions, getting second opinions.
Oh, yeah.
People just have to be assertive about that and not feel like they're going to hurt somebody's feelings. You have to get second opinions.
We are raised to be too polite.
We are.
And to respect authority a bit too much. There are times you have to challenge those things, I think.
Well, and I think at the hospital that I was familiar with, when they gave my mother a new drug, they did give us the paper that went with it to read.
That'll scare you.
Well, I'm used to reading this. And I'm reading this one, and I'm going, this is contraindicated.
Oh,
and they go,
yes.
Really? I said, right here.
Ah.
And so the nurse did not give it, and they called the doctor.
You know, we do see people on such a cocktail of medications nowadays, don't we,
Yes,
Therese?
one to undo the other that undoes the
Oh,
other.
oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
and I think one of my pet peeves is that medications still have two different names. You know, the trade
Oh,
name and the.
and the Latin name.
You know,
Ah.
why can't they do something about that?
Therese, we've got to get you back after the holiday. We'll be taking a holiday break. This is Lansing Online News Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We will see you right after the first of the year, the Monday after the first of the year. Thank you for listening.